I was assigned to observe humans in battle. Instead, I watched a massacre unfold. But the humans weren't the victims. My name is Keetnar, and I'm a junior analyst specializing in Valoran hegemony. When I received my assignment 3 months ago, I thought it would be the opportunity of a lifetime. A chance to prove myself, a chance to propel my career beyond the endless data processing that filled my days at the intelligence headquarters. Simple observation mission, my supervisor had said, sliding the data tablet across his desk. A primitive species is about to engage in combat. We need comprehensive data on their capabilities. You will observe, record, and return with a full analysis. I remember taking the tablet and scanning the species designation, humans, Earth, Solar System, Orion Arm. I'd never heard of them. Are they at war? I asked. Not exactly, Supervisor Carrot said, leaning back in his chair. They're about to be plundered. The Kree Dominion has decided to attack one of their colony worlds. It should be straightforward. The humans have 12 ships in the region. The Kree bring 40. I looked up from the tablet. 40 to 12. That's not a battle, it's an execution. Carrot's expression didn't change. Precisely for that reason, it's a good assignment for a junior analyst. Low risk, high data yield. You'll document how a primitive species responds to overwhelming force. Chances are they'll surrender in the first hour. If they're foolish, they'll fight and be quickly wiped out. Either way, we'll have our data, and you'll have your first field analysis to add to your file. That conversation kept replaying in my mind as, 3 weeks later, I stood on the deck of Silent Witness Observation. Watching the stars drift into the infinite blackness, the ship lived up to its name. Equipped with the most advanced stealth technology in Balaran space, we were completely invisible to any known sensor system in the galaxy. We could drift a few thousand kilometers from a military installation and never appear on its scans. On board were 6 analysts, plus a small crew to maintain the ship. Our mission parameters were clear: observe only, record everything. Under no circumstances were we to interfere with the events we witnessed. The Valoran hegemony had maintained this policy for generations. We watched, we learned, we never intervened. Keetnar, are you going to put a hole in that viewfinder? If you keep looking at it like that. I turned and saw Balarth approaching. He was the senior analyst for this mission, a veteran of 40 observation tours. Over 2 decades, while I was young and still uncertain in my role, Balarth moved with the confidence of someone who had seen it all. He just thought, I said, in humans. Ballard stood beside me, also gazing at the stars. Don't overthink it, Keetnar. I've been on a dozen missions like this: primitive species, overwhelming odds, predictable outcomes. The only question is whether they flee or die. The odds are heavily stacked against them. 40 human warships against 12 human ones, even with technological parity. They don't have it. The numbers are insurmountable. Ballard nodded. Exactly. That's why this mission will be short and uneventful. We'll have our data within hours of arrival, he believes. Then all that's left is to compile the report and head home. You'll have your first successful field analysis. I'll have an easy assignment to pad my resume. Win-win. I wanted to share his certainty, but something gnawed at me. Have you checked the human military archives? Ballard glanced over them dismissively. Nothing remarkable. They've only been traveling in space for 3 centuries. Their ships are crude by our standards, held together by metallic alloys and chemical propulsion systems that we abandoned millennia ago. Their soldiers carry projectile weapons. Projectile weapons. Keetnar, can you imagine? They have nuclear capabilities, I pointed out, like any species that achieves basic spaceflight. Balarth said, not impressive, inevitable. The important thing is what they do with those capabilities. And from what I've seen, humans haven't done anything particularly remarkable. They've had a few border skirmishes with pirates. They've defended a few mining operations from raiders. Nothing to suggest they'll put up significant resistance to a plundering fleet. Complete. Another analyst, a young woman named Sarid, joined us at the visor. Again, talking about humans. Kittner is worried they might surprise us, Ballarth said with amusement. Sarid burst out laughing. Surprise us. They're primitive. Have you seen their ships? I looked at the technical specifications this morning. Their flagship, the one they call the Steadfast, has over 60 cycles. 60 cycles. We decommission ships after 20. Age doesn't necessarily indicate obsolescence, I said. Though I didn't know why I was defending a species I'd never met. No, but the primitive metallurgy and outdated propulsion systems. Yes, Sirais replied. They're not sophisticated ships. Keithnar are spaceships. Yes, but their technology is barely generations behind ours, decades behind the Kree. When the firefight starts, it'll be over very quickly. Ballarth patted me on the shoulder. You're overthinking it because it's your first real assignment. It's normal, but believe me, in 2 days, when the Kree arrive, you'll see exactly what I mean. The humans will see those 40 ships. They'll understand they have no chance, they either surrender or die trying to escape. We'll record everything, compile the data, and be home before the next rest cycle. They left me on the visor, moving on to other tasks, other conversations, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about this mission was different. I'd spent weeks reviewing human files, not just their military capabilities, but their history, their culture, their psychology, and what I found didn't align with Ballarth's nonchalant disdain. I returned to my post and reopened the human military doctrine files. The translation algorithms struggled with some concepts. They had an idea they called acceptable losses. It took me 3 tries to understand what it meant. Humans expected some of their own to die in battle. They planned for it. They had already decided, even before the fighting began, what deaths they could tolerate. That deeply disturbed me. Valoran military doctrine focused on minimizing casualties at all costs. War, for us, was a calculation, resources versus results, lives versus objectives. Death was waste, and waste was failure. We fought to win, yes, but we fought efficiently, logically, with minimal loss of life. But humans approached it differently. In their military manuals, they wrote about sacrifice. They celebrated the soldiers who died for their causes. They built monuments to fallen warriors and told stories of final standoffs and desperate charges that ended in death, but which, within their cultural context, were considered victories. I found records of historical battles, Thermopylae, where 300 warriors held a mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands, the Alamo, where a small garrison fought to the last man against overwhelming odds, Stalingrad, where humans fought building by building, room by room, dying by the millions rather than surrender their city. These weren't anomalies in human history, they were celebrated moments, defining events. Humans seem to value these desperate standoffs as much as their actual victories. They don't fight logically, I muttered, reviewing the files for what felt like the 100th time. They fight for something else, talking to themselves, Kittner. I looked up and saw another analyst, Boren, standing next to my workstation. He was of medium height. Age. Somewhere between Ballart's experience and my youth, with a reputation for being meticulous, I just go through the human files again, I said. Boren leaned against my station. Interesting, I don't know if interesting is the right word. I opened one of the historical battle reports. Look at this. Battle of Midway. Humans against humans. Actually, it was before they unified their world governments. One fleet was significantly larger and better equipped. The smaller fleet was outnumbered and outgunned. Let me guess, Boren said. Did the big fleet win? No, the small one didn't. Against all logical predictions, they won. And when you read the analysis of how they did it, it was hard for me to find the words. it's chaos. They used tactics that shouldn't have worked, they took risks that should have ended in their total destruction. They sacrificed entire squadrons to create gaps for attacks, and somehow, impossibly, they won. Borant studied the report for an interesting moment, but it's ancient history. Pre-spaceflight warfare, hardly relevant to modern combat. Or so it seems. I opened another file. This is from 8 years ago. A human merchant convoy was attacked by Trillian pirates. The convoy had 3 escort vessels. The pirates had 7, all military grade. By any reasonable calculation, the humans should have abandoned the convoy and retreated. But they didn't, Borant said. Seeing where I was going with this, they didn't, I confirmed. They formed a defensive screen around the merchant ships and engaged all 7 pirate vessels at once. They lost 2 of their 3 escorts. The third was badly damaged, but all the merchant ships survived and all 7 pirate vessels were destroyed. Borant was silent for a moment. That's unusual. It's more than unusual, I said. It's a pattern. Humans don't calculate war the way we do. They don't weigh lives against outcomes and choose the most efficient path. They fight for reasons beyond logic. What reasons? I shook my head. I'm not sure I understand them well enough to explain them. Pride, maybe. Honor. There's a word they use. Spite. It doesn't translate well, but it seems to mean fighting someone or something simply because you refuse to let them win, even if fighting costs you everything. Borant straightened up. Well, in 2 days we'll see if that spite works against the Kree. My bet is no. Ancient history and pirate skirmishes are one thing, a full-blown Kree raiding fleet is quite another. He left, and I returned to my files. But something about his certainty, Ballard's confidence, everyone's carefree assumption that this would be a quick and predictable observation mission, bothered me. I opened the human communications intercepts. We'd been monitoring their military channels for weeks. Preparing for this mission, I found the transmission from 3 days ago. When the human fleet first arrived at the colony world they called New Haven, Commander Jack Reyes, 52 years old. Considered middle-aged by human standards, 30 years in his fleet, multiple battle decorations, though all from minor engagements, nothing to prepare him for what was coming. I played the intercepted transmission. Reyes was speaking with the planetary governor, explaining the situation. We know what's coming. Reyes' voice was calm, almost conversational. 40 ships, maybe more. I'm not going to lie to you, Governor. The math isn't on our side. There was a pause. I could hear the fear in the governor's reply, though the words were distorted by atmospheric interference. I understand, Reyes continued, but I need you to understand something, too. We're not leaving. Every ship I have is staying right here between you and them. We're going to buy them time. We're going to make them bleed for every kilometer they advance, and when it's all over, one way or another, they're going to remember that they came to New Haven and found something they didn't expect. The transmission ended. I remained silent for a long time. They knew. The humans knew they were outnumbered. They knew the numbers were impossible. They knew that logically and rationally they should retreat, call for reinforcements, evacuate the colony, and return with superior forces. And yet they stayed. Why? I whispered to the empty station. Why stay when you know you can't win? I noted in my observation log. Humans seem to be aware of the mathematical certainty of their defeat. More observation is required to determine if this is ignorance, cultural programming, or something else entirely. I slept poorly that night. In my dreams, I saw the human commander on the bridge of his battered old ship, gazing calmly at the stars, waiting for death to arrive in the form of 40 CRE warships somewhere. In the darkness of space, those ships drew closer. The Kree's fleet arrived exactly as predicted. I was at my station when the sensors registered the massive energy signatures of 40 ships, emerging from their faster-than-light journey. On the main screen, the crease formation materialized in perfect order. A dark constellation of death arranged in its standard attack pattern. All analysts to the observation deck, Balartha's voice crackled over the intercoms. The engagement is about to begin. I joined the others in front of the main screen. The screen displayed both fleets in tactical view. The 40 Kree warships, enormous and gleaming with gun batteries and shield generators, formed 3 distinct waves. Each ship was a masterpiece of military engineering built for a single purpose, destruction. In contrast, the 12 human ships looked almost pathetic. They held position between the CRE fleet and the planet below, arranged in a loose defensive screen, the Steadfast. Reyes' flagship was at the center of the formation, flanked by 2 destroyers and 3 frigates. The remaining 6 ships, a mix of light cruisers and patrol boats, spread out to cover as much ground as possible. Standard Kree attack formation, Balarth announced to the assembled analysts. You will advance in 3 waves. The first wave will test the human defenses and identify weak points. The second will exploit those points and break their formation. The third will finish off the survivors while the landing craft head toward the colony. Estimated time to human defeat, 2 to 3 hours, depending on how quickly they realize that resistance is futile. The humans are holding their ground, Sarret observed. There are no signs of retreat or surrender. Give them time, Ballard said. When they see the Kree load their weapon systems, reality will set in. On the screen, we saw the Kree fleet adopt an attack formation. Energy readings spiked as the weapon systems charged. Shield generators blazed. It was an impressive display of coordinated military power. And the human fleet hasn't moved. They should withdraw now, Boren said quietly, or at least send terms of surrender. They will, Valert said, but I heard a hint of uncertainty in him. Kree ships, they relayed their standard demand. Surrender the colony and all military vessels or be destroyed. The message was broadcast on every frequency. It was impossible for the humans not to receive it. Commander Reyes responded over open channel. His voice filled our observation deck, calm and steady, as if he were discussing routine patrols instead of facing his own death. Kree ships, this is Commander Jack Reyes of the ship Steadfast, Earth Fleet. We have received your message. This is ours. Turn around and leave this system. You have one chance to do so peacefully. Take it. Silence flooded the observation deck. It had just begun. Sarret threatened them. I finished. 12 ships against 40. And he threatened them. Ballard laughed, but it sounded forced. Bragging. Primitive species always make grand pronouncements before they get crushed. It means nothing. Look, when the Kree ships don't respond to their bluff, they'll reconsider, but the Kree ships will. They responded, not with words, but with action. The first wave, 13 warships, began the advance. All the human ships, Reyes' voice was clearly heard. Battle stations. Hold your position. Make every shot count. The 12 human ships adjusted their formation slightly, closing the defensive screen, and then, impossibly, opened fire first. What are they doing? Sarret exclaimed. They're attacking. They can't believe they're going to win. On the screen, gunfire lit up the space between the 2 fleets. The humans were using a mix of missiles and directed energy weapons. All desperately outdated. By modern standards. The CRE shields absorbed the impacts without a problem. This is suicidal, Boren said. They're charging into a superior force with no chance of success. But there was something odd. I studied the tactical screen more carefully, observing the patterns of human fire. They're not trying to penetrate the shields, I said slowly. Look at the distribution of their fire. They're targeting specific points on multiple ships at once. Ballard leaned toward the screen. Shield cycle interference, he said, surprised. They're trying to create shield harmonics that will force the Kree to cycle their generators. It's a theoretical tactic, but the time required is almost impossible to achieve. They would need perfect coordination between all 12 ships. On the screen, 3 of the ships, the Vanguard Kree, registered shield fluctuations. Minor, barely significant, but real. They got it, I whispered. Perfect coordination between 12 ships. And then the humans attacked. 3 of their frigates broke formation, accelerating to what seemed like their top speed straight into the space between the ships. I think they didn't attack the ships with weakened shields, but rather launched themselves further into the gap the Kree formation had left while the lead ships dealt with the shield cycle. No, Valorth said, no, that's insane. They're exposing themselves to crossfire from multiple ships. They'll be destroyed in seconds. The frigates didn't last seconds, but they lasted long enough. One of them, a ship our database identified as the Rentless, took 3 direct hits from Kree weapons. Her shields collapsed, her hull ripped open in a dozen places, and she kept firing with all her guns focused on the engines of a heavy cruiser. Kree, the Rentless is lost, Sarret said quietly. The reactor is imminent. On the screen, the Rentless exploded, but not before her sustained fire the cruiser's propulsion systems were disabled, and the Kree believed it was left dead in space. The second frigate, the Defiant, was torn apart by concentrated fire from 4 Kree ships, but as it died, it deployed all of its mines and space charges, creating a debris field that forced the Kree formation to adjust course. The third frigate, the Courageous, managed to break through the badly damaged Kree formation with failing systems. It turned and launched all of its remaining missiles at the engines of the nearest Kree destroyer before an impact finally destroyed its reactor. 3 frigates, 3 Kree ships disabled or destroyed, and the human formation, now reduced to 9 ships, had opened a gap in the Kree attack pattern. This doesn't make sense, Ballard said. They sacrificed 3 ships to damage 3 Kree ships. That's not a victory, it's not even a favorable trade. The Kree still outnumber them 37-1. It's not about favorable trades, I said. With understanding dawning. They're not trying to win, they're trying to inflict as much damage as possible on the Kree before losing each ship they disable. It's one less ship that can attack the colony. But they're dying, Sarret protested. They know it, I said quietly. They've known it from the start, but they're buying time, making them pay, forcing them to remember that they came to New Haven and encountered resistance on screen. The battle raged on. The Kree reformed their attack, moving more cautiously. The human ships fell back into a tighter defensive formation, damaged, but still fighting. And then I understood something that chilled me to the bone. The humans weren't just willing to die defending the colony, they were planning to take as many Kree with them as possible, not to win, not to survive, just to make the enemy bleed. Ballard, I said slowly. How do you defeat an enemy that doesn't care about winning? An enemy that only cares that you pay the highest possible price. The senior analyst didn't respond. I watched the screen as the 9 remaining human ships prepared for the next wave of attackers. For the first time since I'd known him, Ballarth looked uncertain. I don't know, he finally said. I really don't know. The second wave of the Kree ships advanced. Twice as large as the first. 24 warships in a coordinated attack pattern. Designed to overwhelm the remaining human defenses through sheer firepower, it should have been the end of it. By any rational calculation, the humans should have been wiped out in minutes. The humans had other ideas. They're launching something, Boren said, studying his readings. Several small ships, dozens of fighters, Cerise asked. No, I said, zooming in on the data. Escape pods. They're launching escape pods. They're abandoning ship. Ballarth leaned forward. What ships? None, I said, confused. All 9 are still operational, but they're still launching pods on the tactical screen. The pods scattered in a wide pattern between the human fleet and the advancing Kree ships. Normally, the CREs would ignore them. The escape pods were harmless, small pods meant to protect the crew until rescue arrived, except these pods weren't empty and they weren't harmless. Energy signatures, Boring said urgently. The pods are triggering weapons systems. That's impossible, Wallert said. Escape pods don't have weapons systems. On the screen, the first wave of pods opened fire. They had been modified. Their life support systems had been ripped out, and they were filled with missiles and energy weapons. Each pod was, in essence, a small, disposable weapons platform. They turned their escape pods into suicide weapons, Sarret whispered. They removed their own safety systems to create more firepower. The CRE fleet, expecting the pods to be harmless, suddenly found itself under attack from dozens of small, highly maneuverable targets. Their point defenses, designed to intercept missiles and houses, struggled to track them all at once. 3 pods were destroyed immediately, then 5 more. But the remaining ones kept attacking, firing everything they had at the advancing CRE ships. They weren't aiming to breach the hulls, I observed. They were targeting elevators and communication antennas. They were trying to blind the CRE fleet, and it was working. Several CRE ships registered communication failures. Targeting computers shut down. Shield coordination between ships became erratic as their ability to share tactical data was compromised. The human fleet took advantage of the chaos instantly. Reyes' voice cut through the intercepted communications. All ships, pattern ships. Target the blinded ships. Maximum firepower. Make it count. The 9 human ships accelerated toward the confused CRE formation, firing with a coordination that suggested months of practice for exactly this scenario. They concentrated all their weapons on the CRE ships that had lost sensors, pounding them with everything they had. 2 CRE destroyers suffered critical damage. Another cruiser had its shield generators overloaded. The Kree formation, perfect and coordinated moments before, began to fragment as the ships lost contact with each other. This is insane, Ballarth said. They're outnumbered, they have less firepower, they're using escape pods as weapon platforms, and somehow, impossibly, they're winning exchanges. They're not winning, I corrected quietly. They're surviving longer than they should. There's a difference on the screen. One of the human ships, a destroyer called the Guardian, took a direct hit from a Kree heavy weapon. Its shields failed. Secondary explosions rippled its hull, but instead of retreating or exploding, the Guardian accelerated straight toward the cruiser. Kree had fired at it, Sarret whispered. They're going to invest. They're going to ram at full speed. The Guardian slammed into the Kree cruiser at a speed that made the impact devastating for both. The cruiser's shields absorbed some of the blow, but the kinetic energy tore through its forward sections. The Guardian disintegrated on impact, but the cruiser was disabled, drifting with massive structural damage and failing systems. They sacrificed a destroyer to disable a cruiser, Ballard said, stunned. They really rammed them. The battle dragged on for another hour. Every minute felt like watching the impossible unfold. The humans lost another destroyer, then a light cruiser. Their formation was in tatters, their ships badly damaged, but the Kree had lost 6 ships completely destroyed and 8 more too damaged to continue fighting effectively. The CRE are withdrawing their damaged ships, Borant reported. They're falling back to regroup. On the screen, the Kree fleet reformed at a greater distance. They still vastly outnumbered the humans, 26 warships. Operations against 6 humans. But now there was something different about their behavior. More caution, more hesitation. They're afraid. I said, surprised by my own observation. Afraid. Ballard looked at me. The Kree don't feel fear. They're raiders. They're bred for combat. So why are they standing there? I pointed at the screen. They still have overwhelming numerical superiority. They should keep attacking, but they aren't. They're reassessing. And I understood why the Kree had come expecting an easy plunder, a few hours of combat against a primitive species that would break and flee or die quickly. Instead, they'd been fighting for hours against an enemy that refused to follow any logical combat doctrine, that sacrificed its own ships without hesitation, that turned escape pods into weapons and rammed enemy ships at full speed. The humans weren't winning, but they were making the Kree pay a price they hadn't expected to pay. And that was changing the calculation. "They're transmitting," Sirius said. "The Kree are transmitting to the human fleet. We hear Commander Kree's voice. Translated by our systems, human ships have fought with unexpected ferocity. We acknowledge your valor. Withdraw your remaining ships, evacuate your colony, and we will allow you to leave in peace. This is our final offer." Silence from the human fleet. Then Reyes replied, his voice still calm, still steady, as if he hadn't lost half his fleet. "Commander Kree. We appreciate your offer. This is ours. Leave our system. Your losses have been considerable. Our colony stays. Our ships stay. If you want this world, you will have to take it over what remains of our fleet. And I promise you that price will be higher than you are willing to pay." Another silence end.